Greetings, everyone. My name is Sanjiv Venkatram, and welcome to another edition of User Delight with Microsoft Technology. In this episode, we'll go over how we create an agent in the exciting Microsoft Copilot Studio and embed that into a Power App to form a secure and complete solution, and in this case, an enablement training sort of solution. Let's head on over to the Copilot Studio to know more. So before we head on over to Copilot Studio, I just wanted to stitch an entire solution to begin with and give you a preview of what it actually looks like, and we'll actually go ahead and unpack this. So I'm an employee. I come into a Power App, which is essentially hosted on Microsoft Teams that centrally allows me to skill myself up, right? As I come in, first off, I know which business unit I actually have access to. So right up front, I know that I'm part of corporate banking or capital markets or operations. So this is set up in a combination of, let us say, Dataverse, which is your database management system, and your Power Apps, right? So let us say I'm in corporate banking. I click on corporate banking, and this goes away and gives me a summary of all the trainings that I've actually enrolled to. So, historically, some of which may have been approved by my managers, some is in the progress, some I've actually completed, and some is in the process of completion, so on and so forth. So if I were to select, like, let us say submitted, it shows me the ones that have been submitted, so on and so forth. And then I select, like, which particular, how do you say, trainings, and it gives me that. And then let us say, all the business units, blah, 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 right? And by the way, these business units will follow the security profile that I am assigned to. So once I do this, I go ahead and actually make a new request. And then let us say I go ahead and actually select, any one among, let us say, trainings, right? And then it's got a whole bunch of topics here. But before I, let us say, commit my time towards, going through, let's say, 2-3 days of trainings on this, I would like to know more about this. So I'm gonna actually select, let's say, the Copilot Studio, and I click on this Copilot to get me a little bit more information on this before I actually go submit the request, right? So I click on this guy, and it goes away. And then what happens behind the scenes is that there is a Power BI that's actually embedded here into my Power Apps, and there's the agent in Copilot Studio that's actually be embedded here as well. So now this goes away and loads the agent. I clearly was playing around with it, so I'm going to basically say yes, hand time back, and I'm going to rate this and no, and it completes the whole thing, right? I should have restarted this for you, but nonetheless, how do you say? We'll see that in gory detail very shortly. So now this has actually gone in and completed. The bot literally lives here and is able to source the information for me. So out here it's gone in and it's given me this information. So it lives inside it doesn't live standalone, it lives inside my app here to service my needs, right? So if I were to go back here, I've actually gotten information on the program. So I select, I knows what my business unit is. I'm in corporate banking. I can select my country, region. All of these can be driven off of master tables. I select a particular enrollment date out here, and then the status here says submitted. It can actually be defaulted to submitted, and then the completion date is open, and I go ahead and I actually make a request, right? So when I make the request out here, this goes away, and actually I'm gonna like sort this, and there you go. My request has actually been submitted to my manager for my manager to go approve this, right? And what's going to happen further is you could have a Power Automate flow that's actually sitting on this that goes to the manager, seeks the approval, and then lo and behold, you move forward with whatever else you have to do. As an example, I'm just going to complete this for whatever it's worth. I'm going to go over to my, let's say, Prudential site, and there you go. That is my request. And in this case, I'm the user, I'm the manager. I wish life was so easy. I'm going to say fine, and then approve this request. So now this request has actually been approved by my manager. And then once I go back to my app right here, it says the final status has been approved as well. I'm just going to refresh this. It shows that the approval has been done. The comments are right here, and I can go ahead and then start the course and so on and so forth, right? So I trust this gives you an end-to-end view as to how to create one of these solutions and embed an agent right within where the action is as part of your solution. It could be, how do you say, you're managing investments, you're doing pricing on insurance programs, whatever the scenario may be, you can actually capture that in an end-to-end fashion. Okay, so that's what we're going to unpack right now and get into details. Thank you very much.
Right. So let's head on over to the Copilot Studio. One among the first things you want to do here is to make sure that you're in the right environment. Um, Ideally, you want to be in an environment that is actually representative of your business. So let us say in your business unit, and you develop your apps or your entire solution, whether it's apps, your flows, or your agents in a particular environment. Also, kindly note the account that you're going to be actually using here. So once you come in here, there are agents, templates that are available right off the bat for you, but I'm not going to get into this because this is a separate topic of discussion. What we will do here is to go ahead and design a new agent. And as we design this, we'll not only talk about the flow, but also about the security components, which are equally important. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click on new agent here, and this goes away and provisions, if you will, the canvas in which we can design our agent, right? So right off the bat, Microsoft has provided us the opportunity to use something from the get-go. But in this case, I'm not terribly interested in this. I want to go ahead and actually develop something on my own for my particular need, right? So I'm going to go ahead and actually skip to configure. And by the way, if you'd like to actually change the language here, there are plenty of options, and these are being built every single day from Microsoft. So this is just a list as of now. And if I were to go, I'm pretty sure we've got Thai here, and for folks who are in Thailand, and so on and so forth. Okay. So I'm actually going to cancel here, and I'm going to go ahead, and then, if you want to, you can give it a name, etc., but we'll get there shortly. So we go to skip to configure here, and this allows us to actually go ahead and configure our agent. So if I were to call this training agent for, just a name, right? This agent is actually going to fetch any kind of programs there are within the organization and surface a summary to you, among other things, right? Also maybe looks up how many trainings you've actually attended and so on and so forth. So I'm going to call this a training agent. If you want to, you can change your icon here. How do you say change icon? And then you select something, right? Let's say we the people here. I'm just going to select that. And then it says here that it's a little too big and the image has to be less than 30 KB. I'm not going to worry about this right now, but suffice it to say that less than 30 KB, you can go ahead and change the icon to the agent. Now here as well, you can actually go ahead and provide a description to the agent as well as instructions as to what tasks it's going to do and so on and so forth. But this is more of an FYI because, as you will see, the conversation is going to be a little bit more guided because we want to be very prescriptive with security, right? Then what you could do is you could actually go ahead and add knowledge sources here. So as an example, if I were to click this, I could either go get public websites, or I could actually go to my SharePoint document library, which aligns with my business unit, let us say, or I could actually add my Dataverse tables as well, which Dataverse is essentially a database management. It's a system, if you will, that comes with your Power Apps, right? And you could actually surface information from tables inside of Dataverse here. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this alone for now. I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to go create this agent as of now. So this goes away and provisions or sets up my agent, and again lets me into the canvas. And as it gets into the canvas, what you will realize is the same exact concept of the name here, the descriptions, instructions, so on and so forth actually get loaded here. As well, on the right hand side, there is an area about maybe 30% of 20% of the screen here devoted to testing the agent, right? So before we do anything else, up on top, you see a whole slew of menus. This is the overview, if you will. And then you actually see the same knowledge source up here as a separate menu. So I'm going to go to knowledge here, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add, so when I say add knowledge, I'm going to actually add SharePoint and Dataverse, both of them in this case. So I'm going to actually say SharePoint, and it's asking me now for the URL of that particular site, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to my Copilot Studio, and I'm going to go over to my SharePoint here. And then once I'm in my SharePoint, I go to, one of the sites, in this case demos, and I'm going to go basically to the documents library. The one thing I have to say is before you add a knowledge source, kindly make sure that your SharePoint library has a bit of taxonomy aligned to your business units, at least at the highest level. And thereby you can go configure the settings of this document library and add security to it so that only folks who belong to a particular business unit can access this, and folks who are not will not be allowed inside, right? So you're building security right at the get-go, even before you actually get to the bot, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and copy the URL, right, to my documents folder here, to my documents folder. I'm going to go back to SharePoint and I'm going to actually enter the site here. So I'm going to add this URL, and lo and behold, it basically says the name is shared documents. And if you want to, you can provide a description of what this is. All this is aligned to your business unit. So I really have to emphasize business security here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and add this, and this goes away and then links my Copilot agent to SharePoint. So there you go. So this has been added right now. Then what I could do is I could go ahead and add Dataverse as well, right? So if I were to click on Dataverse, and I'm going to actually look for a list, a table, if you will, that actually has my historical trainings. So if I were to go say training here, this let's see what it does. It's looking for it. And then there are transaction trainings. So basically it has a transaction. It has training transactions relevant to all the trainings that I've taken, that have been approved, that are in progress, so on and so forth. So I'm going to actually select this guy. I'll show you that later. Okay. In fact, actually, the moment I add this, it's going to give me a preview. So I'm going to say next, and this goes away and gives me a preview of that table. As you can see, there is status. It shows me which business unit I'm part of, the category or the topics that I actually that I've picked as part of the training, the completion status, which country, so on and so forth. Okay, so I'm going to say next. And then the interesting thing here is that if you have synonyms, as an example, the previous company that I used to work for had short forms for, let us say, sales. They used to call it rev, or revenue. They used to call it rev, so on and so forth. So you can go ahead and add synonyms so that as you ask questions, the database kind of recognizes what you're talking about, or maybe perhaps enter a glossary, right? So I'm going to skip that component here. I'm just going to say add. So this goes away and adds my Dataverse table to my bot. So it connects the agent and the table. Okay, so it takes, there you go. So both are done. And I could go ahead further and add other knowledge sources if I were to browse that file, so I could upload a file or public websites, but you got to be super careful here about security. The reason why I added SharePoint and Dataverse here is because both of them can actually have very prescribed business security. In fact, in Dataverse, there is again a concept of environment. And if I'm not part of financial services, and if I were to try to access, this Dataverse, it's basically going to say, sorry, you have to go back and request the admin for the necessary permissions. The same thing with SharePoint. If the SharePoint library is configured by business unit, then if I am not part of that business unit, then I won't be able to actually use this knowledge source. Okay. Excellent. So now I've got these two configured. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop on over to what are called as topics. Now, basically topics you can think of as points of conversation. As an example, out here there are custom topics and system topics. If I were to move over to system topics and go to one that's already there called conversation start, upon triggering a conversation, it sends a message here that you can see on the right saying, hello, there is a variable called bot name. So essentially training agent is the name of the bot. So it's actually picked up the system variable called bot name. And it basically says, hello, training agent, and I'm a version of blah, 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 right? Now, the interesting thing here is you can actually customize this, right? But before we get to this, let us head on back to topics. The fundamental point is you can use all of these system topics or ones that you deem necessary, right? So as an example, I'll turn off this thing called conversation boosting. We'll get to that shortly. And then I'm going to actually turn off, let us say, the fallback topic, multiple topics smashed. I'm going to actually turn off on error for now, right? On reset conversations, I'm going to basically keep the end of conversation because I would like to use that as like a nice goodbye to the customer, and I'm going to actually keep this conversation start topic. Now, if I were to go to custom topics here, I can actually, have my own greetings, if you will. But the way I'm configured, if you will, is I kind of hang my hat on if there is something easy that gets you started, why not go with that? And why do you need the additional step of actually going and configuring your own greetings and so on and so forth? So I'm going to actually turn these things off, and you will actually see that I will go ahead and configure my own topic, but I'll do that shortly, and I'll give you an example of how this actually, you've seen it before, but I'll also give you an example of how this looks like in real life, right? So I've turned all of this off. I'll go back to my system topic and I'll go to conversation start, right? So just like anything else, basically a conversation has a trigger point. I'm sitting on my couch and there is a dog that's actually barking outside my house. That to me is a trigger. So because it is a trigger, it's the dog's barking. I actually make my way. I get off the couch. I make my way over to the door, and then I open the door. So that is an action. Me walking over, opening the door, and that is an action, right? So there's a trigger. There's an action. Then I ask myself, hey, is this, my neighbor's dog or is it a stray dog? And depending on what kind of a dog it is, I take further action. So there is a condition, right? So essentially, the bot gets or the agent gets triggered by a trigger. It could be any kind of trigger. We'll come to that shortly. So it could be a trigger, and then there is an action, and then there is a condition, and further actions, so on and so forth. Okay. So in this case, on conversation start, if you will, is actually a trigger. There are other triggers over here as an example on redirect. We'll actually do this later when the conversation started. Based on what the user actually asks, we can actually redirect the conversation over, right? But in this case, we'll take the standard trigger, which is on conversation start. And then here, as we were discussing earlier, we can go ahead and add our own message. So as an example, what I could do, and I do have a bot here from before. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy that in the interest of time so that we can actually make this a little faster instead of me having to type everything. So kindly give it a second for this to load. And I'm going to go to my agents, and I believe I have one called enablement. So I'm going to select this guy. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the topics, and then I'm going to go over to the conversation start topic and literally copy the text here. So I'm going to copy this guy, and then I'm going to come back over and I'm going to replace this with the copied text, right? So greetings, I'm Harmony, your friendly enablement or training agent. And if you right mouse on it, you can actually add emojis as well, right? He or she, you can add emojis as well, like so. And that's completely up to you. You can also, let us say, go ahead and add, if you want to, images inside this. But my brotherly guidance would be to keep this simple, professional, and kind, right? It has to be sort of inviting. If it is let us say, a little too terse and little too, on the businessy side, it might turn off users. So the idea here is to keep it kind, keep it professional, and keep it simple so that it invites the conversation. So here is the conversation, I'm Harmony, your friendly enablement agent. Note that on occasion, I lean on generative AI to get answers. You put that disclaimer right up front, right? So this is a message that I send here on starting conversation. And if I were to refresh this, you will see that this goes away and makes the change right away, right? It takes there you go. See, it has actually given you a preview of how this actually looks like. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and then I'm going to ask a question, right? Because I would like, the user to select something and go from there, right? So here too, I'm going to go over to my enablement topics, and then I'm going to copy this very same thing over. It's a question, how may I be of assistance to you today? And I am going to ask them to choose options from below, right? So I'm going to select this like so, right? I'm going to select this, come back here, and I'm going to actually paste this, right? So now, once I ask a question here, and if I were to refresh this guy, test my agent, you will see that it introduces itself, the bot introduces itself, and then it says, how may I be of assistance to you, right? So now what I could do is I could have multiple options. I could have choice options. I could have use the entire user's response, if you will. But in this case, I'm actually going to use choices because I want to control the conversation a little bit. I don't want it to be open ended with the user going, hither, thither, right? Basically, at the end of the day, this is a professional setting. I want the user to be guided to the business units that he or she is actually responsible for. I don't want them to go cover the entire organization and start reading sensitive information. I don't want to do that. I want to be in control, right? And anybody who's actually in the business, whether in HR, finance, private banking, wealth banking, etc., you know your particular domain, you know who your friends are, who your teams are. That's and where your information is actually stored securely. That's exactly what I'm referring to here, right? So I'm going to go basically say new option and then say enable get. I'll say get enablement records, right? Get enablement records. Another one could be get enablement documents, right? Documents. So I'm going to give them two options to get the records or documents. And now the records or the line items are in Dataverse, and the documents for trainings are actually inside of your SharePoint, right? So I'm very prescriptive. I cannot add other options to say some generic search, so on and so forth, but I'm not going to worry about that right now, right? So the moment I actually add these options, the bot actually comes up with a variable to store this option. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this guy here, and I'm going to actually call this var choice or var user choice. And then I'm going to make this a global variable that, and allow it to carry between sessions so that it is global in nature. It can be accessed across many different topics, not just this particular topic, and then it can extend across different sessions that the user is actually in, right? So I'm going to set this as a variable. And then when this variable is equal to enablement records, what should I do? When it's actually in enablement documents, what should I do, right? So this is the condition. Remember, we have the trigger, we have actions, and we have conditions. So essentially, on the trigger, these are the actions, and then based on the actions, here are the conditions, right? So I'm going to actually go ahead and save this. And then if I were to preview this up here, so this takes about 20 seconds to actually get saved. And then if I were to preview this, you will notice that it goes away and gives me these options: get enablement records or get enablement documents, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is now is exactly the time for me to go ahead and go back to topics here, and I'm going to add a custom topic, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add a custom topic from blank. And here the trigger is not going to be phrases. I mean, the person doesn't have to say hi because the person's already selected enablement documents, let us say, as a choice, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap across the triggers here and go to on redirect, right? So I'm going to select this. I'm going to go rename my topic as topic documents, topic underscore documents, right? So in this, topic document is going to get triggered upon redirection from the user having selected the get enablement documents option, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and then exactly like so over here, right? So if I were to go select, enablement documents, that's what I'm talking about. So I go to, topics, and I go to, custom topics. There's my document. This is exactly what we're talking about, right? So I'm going to basically come, get here. And then from the conversation start, the variable called user choice, which is enablement document, is passed to this. So I'm going to basically reiterate. I'm going to ask a question and then say, okay, you are looking for, and then I'm going to actually select the var choice, which is your enablement records. And I'm going to basically say what I can help people with. So I'm going to again copy this here. It says, what about, this may I assist you with? In fact, let me just actually copy the whole thing instead of wordsmithing it here, right? So I'm going to select this whole thing, remove this, right? Remove everything here. And I'm going to literally copy this, and I'm going to actually, this choice here, I'm going to delete that choice. Whoops, I delete the whole thing, right? Copy, and then I'm going to remove the variable. Okay, what about, and I'm going to select my choice here, may I assist you with, right? So I'm asking a very precise question saying, what about enablement records may I assist you with? In this case, I'm actually going to select the entire user's response. So over here, it says user's entire response. I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to put this in a variable, right? When the user responds saying, hey, I would like to know a summary of the program. So whatever the user actually asks. So I'm going to go ahead, select this guy. I'm going to call this var user question. And then I'm going to keep this as a local topic. And I'm gonna basically say, receive values from other. I don't want to. I'm just basically gonna limit it to this particular topic here. Okay, so that's that. Then, based on what the user actually asks me, I'm actually going to call on my generative AI. So I'm going to go to advanced in actions, and I'm going to go to generative answers. So this now brings up, well, first of all, it asks me, what is it that you seek here, right? So I'm going to go to this input here, and I'm going to actually select var user question. This is the entire response that the user, it's a variable that has captured the user's entire question, right? So I'm going to pass it now to get to this generative AI to get answers. So I'm going to edit this, and out here I'm going to limit it. I'm going to actually say search only selected sources, right? So I'm going to be very prescriptive here to actually guide them towards the shared documents. Because of security, business security, I don't want them to go every which place. I guide them to the shared documents of which they have permissions to access, and to be able to use, your OpenAI to actually Azure OpenAI to go in and then, or your Copilot, let us say, to go in and then retrieve or summarize the information and bring it back to the user. Okay. You can also keep this on, allow AI to use its own general knowledge, but in this particular case, I'm going to turn this on because I don't want to go beyond the scope of what the users actually ask, because it's a very prescriptive sort of a solution on trainings. Okay, so I'm going to actually do this, and I'm going to go ahead and save this, right? So in this case, let us actually go ahead and, if you will, test this out, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, get me enablement documents. So this now goes ahead and actually says, okay, what about enablement documents would you like, right? It should, right? So let us see if it does. Well, it doesn't. The reason is we have to go to conversation start and hand off the conversation to this topics document. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to go over to topics. I'm going to go over to conversation start here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over, and then out here where it says the condition is enablement documents, I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to say topic management, and I'm going to go to another topic. And in this case, I'm actually going to go over to my topic document. So that's how I route the conversation from the conversation start to my topics document. So I'm going to select this guy. So now it should work plenty fine. So I save this. So I'm here. Let me go to the system topics and go to conversation start. What I am going to do here is I'm going to actually refresh this as well, because I've actually done the redirection. So I'm going to redirect it and refresh this, and let us see. We'll give it a minute or so for it to refresh, and let us actually test this out. Right? Excellent. So I'm going to actually say here, get enablement documents is an option. Let us see what it does. Okay, see, it says, okay, what about get enablement documents may I assist you with? Now you can clean this up. You can wordsmith it. You can clean this up. So now and now we are in the redirect, right? So I'm going to go to view topic. So we are here. So now I'm going to ask this question, right? So I'm going to, what about enablement? So I'm going to ask I'm going to, as a user, I'm going to say, give me a summary of the Power Platform Enablement Program and kindly bullet bulletize key points, right? Key points, and I'm going to actually send this into this variable, right? And what that's going to do is that it's going to take this and it's going to pass it to the generative part where it goes to SharePoint. I have a document there, and let us see if it actually retrieves the information and then gives it to me in a bullet point summary, right? There you go. See, this is fantastic. It's actually gone in and it says Prudential, Power Platform Enablement Program focuses on empowering end users. And then how does it actually do it? Well, it is the nature of engagements over here is community building, training, and a consulting approach. And then, there's a detailed class, and so on and so forth, right? And it also goes away and highlights, the PDF that it's actually talking about. So if I were to click this, it goes away and shows me the PDF, right? So Prudential does actually do this program where you're developing communities, you're actually developing what is called as a center of excellence to provide visibility to the senior leaders about what your teams are actually doing with this Power Platform, so on and so forth, okay? And then, here are some inspiring moments for Prudential, but we are not going to talk about that right now, okay? Super. So once we have this, once we get this information from here, I can actually say, hey, look, I've got the information that I need. Does this actually suffice or not? So I'm going to go ahead and then so. Let me go back here to the topic docs. And once I go over, once I get the information, I'm going to redirect it to the end of conversation. So if I view this topic here on redirect from my docs topic, this goes away and says, hey, look, did that answer your question? If so, could I give you time back so you can actually go work on other things, right? And this essentially is a true or false. And then based on the response, I can ask, let us say a customer satisfaction question and so on and so forth, right? So let's do that here. I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to go to topics and I'm going to actually go to the system topics. And I'm going to go to the end of conversation topic, right? This is as well a redirect from topic documents. Now this says, did that answer your question? And then this is basically a yes or no. So if it is equal to true, you do something. If it is not, you actually redirect it back to somewhere else, right? So over here, as an example, here it says all of the conditions. Sorry, wasn't able to help you better. And then would you want to try this again? And if this is a yes, you redirect it back somewhere else, or if not, so on and so forth, okay? So we are not going to worry about this if not part. We're going to focus on the true part. So this is good enough. Did that answer your question? Is good enough for me. So you can customize this, right? Out here, I've gone ahead and actually customized this. And I said, did that answer your question? May I hand time back? In fact, this is a nice way of actually talking to the customer, isn't it? So I'm going to copy this. Instead of a plain Jane, did that answer your question? I'm going to paste this here, right? And I'm going to actually save this. So as you can see, even the topics that come with the Copilot, you can actually customize, right? So I'm going to go to system topics you can customize. So I'm going to go over to the custom topic here, to the thank you, and I'm going to hand off. I'm going to basically say topic management, go to another topic and go to conversation end, right? So this goes away and completes the flow. So let us actually test this. I'm going to save this and then I'm going to actually refresh everything here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually, select enablement documents again and then ask the same question over again, right? So I'm going to say, give me a summary of the Power Platform Enablement Program, right? And then send this question in. In this case, I'm not, bulletizing the answer. So it's going to be one big blurb that it actually spits out. We'll give it a minute or so for this to retrieve the answer. So there you go. There's my answer. And then it basically goes to the conversation end topic. It is now in the redirect mode, right? So it's actually redirected to the end of the conversation. Did that answer your question? May I hand time back to you? And it says yes or no. So I'm going to say yes. And once I say yes, it asks me a customer satisfaction question, a rating. So I give it a rating. And then it says, thanks for the feedback. Anything else I can help you with? I say no. And it basically says goodbye, right? So the entire conversation now, the flow is been recorded, right? So the key points over here is to note that you can actually leverage your system topics. You don't need to start off afresh. You can customize your conversation start, point A. Point B is that in my conversation start, I haven't allowed the user to go everywhere. I've guided the conversation to where the secured folders or tables are. You can do the same thing with records as well. But I mean, that could be another action here. It's very similar to what I've done here. I just select, Dataverse as an option, right? So I'm very prescriptive based on security. That's an important consideration. And then based on this, I send him over to another topic. And in this topic, I go to generative answers. I ask a question, capture the response from the user, and pass it to generative actions. And here I'm being extremely prescriptive and sending them to where the documents are. Likewise, you could also send them to, Dataverse to summarize and so on and so forth. You could also leverage your generative AI, but I would do that separately because I don't want it to conflate with what I actually have as a secured setup. You follow me? So I want to be very prescriptive, okay? You can add another option here in your conversation start and say other generic questions, and you can guide them to allow AI to use general knowledge, okay? But kindly do be careful as you do this, right? Then once we are done with this, we hand it off to the conversation end. Here again, you can customize the question and then the flow, so on and so forth. You can even redirect them back to this step as let me show you that. If I were to do add a node here, and if I were to go to topic management, I could go to another topic, and in fact, actually it's right here. I could go to step, right? From here, I could go to step, and I could actually, guide them back to this question again, right? In case they're not satisfied, right? So you can move around inside the flow up and down, all right? So I'll let you guys, have fun with that when the time's appropriate. So now that we are done with the bot, what we can actually do is it's been saved. So this works. We know that this works. So now let us actually go over the channels where we want this bot to actually live, right? And in our case, we want a custom website, and I'll tell you why. So if we go to channels over here, and if I go to custom website, before I actually select this, so it says, first off, it says because you chose team authentication, only Teams is available. That's fine. But then because we're going to go to authentication settings shortly. But what I want to do is I want to select a custom website because I want to put it on a Power BI tile that I'll further embed in my application. Okay, we'll see that shortly. So to do this, I'm going to go to authentication. I'm going to go to settings back up here again, and I'm going to actually go to security, right? Once I'm actually in security, I'm actually going to go to authentication, and here it says authenticate with Microsoft ID. This is the one that he was talking about, saying you've chosen Teams authentication. What that means is I've actually chosen my Active Directory authentication, the one that I'm actually logged in over here with. But in this case, what I'm going to do is because I want the custom website, I'm going to say authenticate manually, right? And the moment I actually say is manually, it asks me, do you want to require that the user sign in? I'll say yes. And here is a redirect URL that it automatically actually pops in. And then it's got a service provider here of Azure Active Directory 2, a client ID and secret, and so on and so forth, token exchange. If I were to go here to this and go to settings on the other side and go to security here, you'll see exactly the same thing. So kindly give me a second. I'll show you how this came about, right? Go to authentication, and then you see it has actually got a I've defined this before, so that's the reason why it automatically pops up with a redirect URL. It is the Azure Active Directory provider, the client ID, and the secret, so on and so forth. It's actually filled all this in. And the same thing has actually been absorbed here as well. So what I could do is I could go up here to this, I could copy this, right? The scopes here are the profile, open ID. This is part of OAuth 2, and it allows you to actually get into authentication, right? So when you do that, you get access to this open ID and your profile. Now, these sites dot read all etc. is a permission to SharePoint that you actually provide through an app registration inside of Microsoft Azure. At this point, if you're an end user and if you have come up here, you need to hand off to your IT, hand the bot off to your IT for them to actually fill this out, right? So I'm going to actually basically copy all this here, Control C. I'm going to put this here, and let me show you where we need to go to actually do this, right? So I'm now an admin. I'm not an end user. I'm an admin, and I basically go over to my Azure Active Directory. So once I go to my Azure, I'm in my Azure portal. I go to the 3 lines here. I'm going to go to Microsoft Entra ID, which is the new name for your Azure Active Directory, right? Once I'm here in my Azure Active Directory, I go to App Registrations. When I go to App Registrations, I've got a whole bunch of applications over here. I'm just going to actually like sort this out. And then I see one here called Copilot Registration. So if I click this, basically it has got, the client ID, and it's got, the object ID, so on and so forth. I'm not going to worry about this as of now. But if I were to go to a new one, if I were to say, if I click on app registrations, if I go to a new app registration, I can give it a user-friendly name. I'm going to basically say enablement agent, right? And then I can say accounts in this organization only in Prudentia, single tenant can they access, or they could be multi-tenant. If my organization has got different tenants, I could select this, right? And then I basically select a web platform, and then it has given me this redirect URL. So I can go over, select this, you redirect URL, Control C, and then go to my Azure and then paste this here. Okay, so paste it here. This goes to the bot framework essentially in Azure. So I can go ahead and register this application. So this goes ahead and actually creates this application. And then once this is actually done, I can actually go to certificates and secrets here. So I can go ahead and actually add a client secret and provide a description, right? ABC, whatever. And then, you can actually time bound this and then basically add this, and this goes away, and it will actually give you a client secret. It gives you a value. Kindly copy this because this is going to go away after, right? So you copy this, save it securely in either your secure, let us say OneNote or Notepad or wherever, but I would say OneNote perhaps. And then once you have this, I'm not going to do this, but because I have done this before, right? And then I'm going to go ahead to API permissions, right? And then I'm going to actually say, add permission, right? I'm going to say add permission, and I'm going to say Microsoft Graph. And in this case, these are delegated permissions to the bot. So I'm actually going to say delegated permissions. And then if I were to go, open ID is right here and profile is right here. So I didn't see sites here, right? So I go to sites, and then I can basically say sites read all, right? And there are files there, right? So I'm going to actually go select files read all, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add these permissions. So it's actually updating this. And then now I need to grant Prudentia consent, right? For all of this, right? So I'm going to go ahead and actually click these and say, and it says, do you want to grant consent? I'm going to say yes. And then it goes away and it says successfully granted permissions on to read files, to share files. Now, it is very important to note that even though I'm actually granting tenant-wide permissions over here, I'm going to be controlling what people can access through those options, through the options that I provided in the conversation start topic. You got to be super clear here that even though the bot has access, it doesn't necessarily mean that the user has access. Only an admin who has got access across the tenant will be able to go everywhere the person wants. Otherwise, it is guiding you to that specific SharePoint location through the conversation. I trust this is actually, clear to everyone, right? So I'm going to go ahead. This, I had this before. So if I were to go to my Azure here, so all my API permissions are done. My client secret, I've got my value here. And then from my overview, I know, what my client ID is. So when I go back to my app, I know my client ID, I know my client secret, and then this automatically gives you the tenant ID. And then I know my scopes, so I can actually copy it over from Azure. If I were to go back to my API permissions over here, I know what my scopes are, so I'm all set in terms of my security configuration. I suppose this should be clear to everybody. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually save this, right? So it says save this and changes, blah, 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 are available to use in these topics. So I'm gonna basically say save. And the beautiful thing is that this asks the user to sign in whenever they actually use this bot, right? So authentication settings are done. So I'm going to go back to my agent here. Here's my training agent. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to channels and I'm going to actually go to custom channel, right? And in fact, if I were to get out of this for a second, you see basically because I said from a security standpoint, you need to be able to sign in, it has actually asked me for the login here, okay? So now that I have this configured, I'll go to my custom website and it gives me my embed code, HTML embed code. So I'm gonna copy this, right? I'm gonna copy this guy over, and then I'm gonna go over to Power BI. So in Power BI, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually go over to, any particular, how do you say, workspace. So if I were to go to workspaces here, there are plenty of workspaces here. So I'm just going to select one that I had recently done. So I'm going to select this enablement workspace. And if I were to go to a new item here, I'm going to basically say, give me a new dashboard. I'm going to call this training agent, right? An agent dashboard. So I'm going to say create. And then out here, what I'm going to do is in this agent, I'm going to go add a tile. So I'm going to add a tile. I'm going to look for web content here, click next. I'm going to basically put that code here. I'm going to call this enable or training agent, agent. And the moment I actually give it a name, there you go, it has actually absorbed it. And then I'm going to go click on apply, right? Let me see if I've copied this properly. Kindly give me a second. Enablement agent. Yes, I've copied this, right? And then I go over to my Power BI and then I'm gonna go ahead and then actually paste this here. And then I'm gonna basically say apply, right? So that's how I'm actually able to embed. Now, how do you say, I still need to actually go through and see if, let me just go back here. Let me see single sign-on embed code. I think everything looks good here. Let me go back to security. Oh, I haven't published the bot, right? That's the issue, right? So let me go publish this bot right now. So this is being published. Everything is good to go because I've configured the bot, I've added the security, and now I just go over and publish the bot, right? So let's do that. It takes a minute or so for this to publish. Okay, so the bot is actually published now. So now if I were to go to channels again and then go to, I'll copy this one more time, go over to my Power BI. In fact, actually, I'm just going to delete this guy, delete the tile. I'm going to re-add it, right? Edit, let us say new tile, web content. Next, I'm going to paste this embed code here. I'm going to give it a title and say training agent, right? And lo and behold, now when I hit apply, it is asking me to log in and this is good to go, right? This is good to go now. So I'm gonna actually make this a little bigger like so. So this is actually, we are in business and I am going to, you don't have to do anything. It is actually saved and we are good to go. So if I were to go back to my workspace here and go to enablement agent, I should see two dashboards. If I click on one, this goes away and loads my agent, right? So I've got my tile here. I know this actually works. I've done this before, it works. So if I were to go over to my Power Apps right now, I'm going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to go insert a new screen. So I've got a new screen here. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go insert a Power BI tile. So I'll say Power BI and I see my Power BI tile here. I'm going to make this a little bigger. I'm going to go select my enablement agent as the workspace. My dashboard is a training agent. And lo and behold, here is my tile. So I'm going to go select the tile, preview this. So this is loading up here. Training agent right there, comes right over. Excellent. And now it is going to go ask me to log in, right? So if I log in here, it basically goes away and actually asks me to copy this code. So enter this code here. So I'm going to go enter this code like so. And now the app begins. It says, greetings, I'm Harmony. How may I be your assistance? And then I say, get enablement documents, and you know the rest, right? So I'm going to say, give me a summary of the Power Platform enablement program like so. Okay, and then I enter this in, it goes away, and in a few seconds it's gonna go give me that entire blurb, and I'm basically all set, right? And at that point I'm gonna basically say, yes, it did answer. May I hand time back? Yes, absolutely. So 5 ratings. And is there anything else? No, and I'm good to go. Okay, I trust this gives you an idea as to how you can set up an end-to-end solution. In this case, it is training, needs of trainings, as you saw at the beginning, and then as to how you can configure the bot, how you can configure the topics inside the bot, the knowledge sources, how you can actually configure the channels and security, which you have to do in Azure in order for this to actually work securely. The key points here are that you only provide access to people based on need. So as you see, even though the bot has got read access across files and folders and sites, it is guided through that combination of the topic where it's actually going to a particular option, which happens to be, in this case, SharePoint. And the SharePoint security is configured in such a way that the user will have only access to the folders and the files that he or she is entitled to, right? So you're configuring security right up front in your SharePoint, and through the bot guiding the user to go there and pull summaries and so on and so forth. So now your generative AI becomes really secure, and it doesn't go willy-nilly and pull all kinds of information from the entire organization. I trust this is actually helpful. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful time building your agents and your solutions. Cheers.